I think what is important, what will do justice to people understanding what's happening in Zimbabwe is that Zimbabweans have been hoodwinked before, and world over we see people being driven in different directions by politicians and politics, and people not understanding that. What's been happening in Zimbabwe is that whether people like it or not, there was a military coup on a government. Whether one likes that government or not is a different story. The fact of the matter is that there was a military coup, and that from that moment on the constitution was effectively suspended, and the constitution hasn't been effected just yet. The military just announced today that they will continue patrolling the streets with the police, whereas as a matter of fact the military cannot be deployed into the streets without a proclamation by the president of the country that that will be the case. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that people cannot lose sight of the fact that most Zimbabweans are happy that Mugabe is gone. Most Zimbabweans would have welcomed the fact that the military came in and removed President Mugabe. But what most Zimbabweans need to understand is that Mugabe was presiding over a system that remains intact, and that to think otherwise, to think that Mugabe was the only problem, is in effect incomplete thinking. People need to think beyond that. People need to think beyond their hatred of Mugabe, who I disagreed with for a long time. Mugabe tortured me. But as a matter of fact, I'm not naive to celebrate that event instead of looking at the whole process and the rest of what's going to happen. People need to look at what's going to happen.
So talking of the military coup, as you described it, even though the military is saying it was not a coup d'etat, they were after criminals according to them, and from there they arrested a few people, and it was like the Zimbabweans or the ZANU-PF party that was trying to impeach Mr. Mugabe until he resigned himself. So what's your take on the whole process?
I think that people need to understand it. When people want to oppress you, the first thing they do is try and define your language for you, is try and tell you what language means. And in this case, the military tried to redefine the word coup. A coup is when anybody takes over power using the threat of or the power of a gun. And this is what the military did on Mugabe. So we can put that one to rest. Everybody who's got a mind understands that a coup is a coup not because somebody says it is or it is not, especially when the person who's carries it out says it's a coup. We know why they were saying it's not a coup. It's because Southern African Development Community has a law that says a coup is not allowed in the region. You cannot take over power militarily. And they were afraid that powerful countries like South Africa and Angola would come in and stop a coup from taking place. So they lied about that. But we know that they put Mugabe under house arrest, and they arrested a few people. Here are the important things. The military is not allowed to arrest anybody. Here is the important thing. The commander of the defense forces is not allowed by the constitution to deploy military assets. He cannot tell his soldiers to go out of the barracks. He did that. That was outside the law, that was outside the constitution. That is treason by law. So we can put that one to rest, and we know why they lied about it being something other than a coup, when it in effect was. And there is the next thing. They are still on the streets today. A new president has been sworn in, and they're still on the streets. And if you're really serious about what's going on and about the law, you're wondering whether Mnangagwa is the president or Chiwenga is still the president here, because Mnangagwa hasn't said that he has given an order for the military to be on the street. So you've got all those serious problems. But I think what is important here is for us to look forward. What's going to happen to the country? What's going to happen to a lot of people? We know a lot of these things are happening in Africa. And when they happen, people forget it. People celebrate the moment and forget the future. You're hearing about slavery going on in Africa, and you're thinking to yourself, isn't this a product of us going against our own rules? Isn't it a product of us getting excited by the moment and forgetting that in order for us to be safe, we have to follow our rules? We cannot trust politicians. You have to look at Mnangagwa yourself and try to find out whether or not in his history this guy respects the law. Everything we know about this guy, everything we know until the moment he takes over the state, until he captures the state, is that he's a criminal. The United Nations Security Council says so in 2002 and 2003. Two reports dedicated to how he is a member of the criminals that were we're mining what is termed blood diamonds in the DRC. So he's not just killed people in Zimbabwe, he's participated and enriched himself in killing other Africans in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Imagine what he's going to do when he's president of the country. All his friends, Rochenberg is a criminal who cannot set foot in South Africa. In half of the countries in Africa have declared him a wanted man and have warrants of arrest through Interpol for him. And this is Mnangagwa's best pal in business. You have every other business that Mnangagwa has. He is doing these businesses with criminals that are in the diamond. Chiwengwa himself, he owns 100 watches. Each of them, 50 of them, 36 karat gold and 36 karat diamond. So you realize that the country's been taken over by what you could easily call an African mafia, and people don't realize that. And before we know it, everything is will have gone asunder. And we know why Mnangagwa is going to be accepted in the Western world very quickly, and why he's going to try and work with Britain and America, why he's going to try and make himself a good man. He's going to do that because he doesn't want to be on the same list as his friends. He's going to use his capture of the state to prevent any more investigations of himself and his friends by the United Nations. And that is what is dangerous about this.